Thank you so much for inviting me here to share my views on something. Yes, I know I'm going to talk about China. But listening to the terrific, excellent speeches before me, I just cannot help asking you this question. Why we need a contract in the first place? We talk about we need social contract. What's the fundamental reason that we need to have a contract among us in the first place? Have you thought about this question? To me, we need a contract is because we need to solve. Contract is a beginning for us to solve a fundamental contradiction, a fundamental dilemma we human beings face from day one until the day last. What is the fundamental dilemma we are facing? Because as a human being, as a social animals, we have unlimited desire and wishes. But we always have limited resources, right? We can never solve this problem. So therefore, essentially, each one of us were competitors against each other, competing for this very limited resources, either between groups, between human individuals, or between countries. We just talk about security issue. So therefore, I'm going to come back to this point again when talking about China. Therefore, social contract, for one purpose, many purposes, one fundamental purpose is to shape our behavior, to make sure we are going to compete with rules. We are going to compete fairly. It's not to stop our competition. It's to make sure we have a fair competition. We have equal opportunities. That's why we need a contract, first point. Second point, I'm getting close to what I want all of us get into, is that contract is not just to shape our individual behavior. Contract, more importantly, to shape our collective behavior. Why that? Because only collectively we can maximize our strength of competition. That's why the contract is always within a unit. With the family first, how you behave in your family, and with your community, and eventually with your country. We all know a good contract enables us to behave jointly or collectively, then therefore our strength is maximized. 10 people work collectively can be stronger than 100 of people working individually. That's why organizers or rulers or players in a given society always want to expand the unit, because the bigger the unit is, the effectiveness of the contract will be. That's why big countries make differences, if that contract is fair and good. But if a big country with a bad contract, for example, dictatorship, the damage is not only for the people in that unit, but could be all of us, because we're increasingly globalized, as two previous speakers said. Then I go to my second point. I just came back from Sochi, where every year this time, there is an organization called Valdai Discussion Club. We organize an annual conference in Sochi to invite all the so-called top scholars or strategic thinkers to go there to discuss issues. At least Russians think it's important for our community. And of course, as you can imagine, every year this time, Putin will go there to give a speech and then answer questions. He is amazing, because usually he showed up the last day of the conference, gave about 1 hour speech or even longer, and then answer questions for 3 to 4 hours. From 4 o'clock in the afternoon, usually lasts to 8 or 8:30. Now here's what I want to tell you. I got a chance, because this is my 7th time to join the Valdai Club conference. This time, as last year, I got a chance to ask Putin a question. which is very much matters about what I'm going to talk about China. This is a question I asked President Putin. I said, President Putin, we know that we are undergoing an unprecedented, fast, and maybe irrevocable transition as a global community. We all know how fast this world is changing right now. As such, major powers matter. Leadership matters. But our problem is this. Not every major power is on the same page. If we talk about major powers, of course, United States, China, Russia, Japan, India, or Germany, to some extent. You see the problem here. Talk about leadership. China, Russia, Japan, India, Germany, and so on and so forth, all have competent and capable leaders, and leaders who can play leadership. But United States, the strongest one, has a very questionable leaders. For the first time, by the way, I'm an American citizen. For the first time, we have a president that needs to be managed. And we don't know if he's manageable or not. So my question to Mr. Putin is, how could Russia, under your leadership, strong leadership, because when I came in today, we have a speaker here talk about how tough Putin really is. So I ask him a question. As a Putin, as a presidency, you have been quite successful and quite been senior. So how would you contribute your strong leadership, not only for the well-being of Russia, but to the whole global community? Of course, his answer is a little bit disappointing because he began to blast the United States and everything is Americans' fault. Because he has a sense of, in my view, besieged. He thought the entire world is ganging up against him or against Russia. But my point here is China has risen so rapidly that it has become a number 2 power in 30 years. In 1978, when China started reform, the per capita in China is barely $240. Last year, the per capita is almost $10,000 in 30 years. In our history, no country, no unit as big one as China has been rising so fast. So as a result, how China signed a contract among its own people, the Chinese, and how that contract will impact on this society, on this world, in which China has become more and more integral part, is very important to our life. So we have to understand first how China has been rising so fast. China is not the first rising power, and China would not be the last. But if we look at the previous rising powers, let's start it from the one after industrialization, the British. We have, at a certain moment, a certain period of our history in the past 300 years, we have the Great Britain, Germany, United States, Japan, and Soviet Union, or Russia. All of them has a certain period become a rising power. And their rises have all impacted our life tremendously and sometimes disastrously. But if you compare China's rise with the rises of those previous rising powers, very easily you find 2 fundamental differences. Number one, the previous rising powers, when they began to rise, they already have a very strong military power. In our jargon, we call it a global reach military capability, which means this rising power already has the military forces that can fight massive wars far beyond the border. The British had that, United States had that, Soviet Union had that, Germany had that, Japan had that. But when China began to rise, even to this day, when China is so powerful, we all know Chinese military still cannot find a massive walls, let's say 200 miles beyond the border, massively, let alone 1978. So China is still building up the so-called global reach military capability. But now China is already the largest trading power or trading nation on earth. China, look at how you calculate it. In terms of economy, China is already number one or number two. That's the first differences. The second differences, which is more fundamental. The previous rising powers, let's think about it. The process of the rising is a process to challenging the existing international order. The British challenged international order built by Spanish. Japan and Germany challenged international order established by Anglo-Saxons. And Soviet Union challenged the liberal order established by United States and her allies in the West. Even the United States, if you look carefully, when United States was rising, United States was challenging the international order built by the British. But that challenge is a little bit moderated because the same people, same language, and same God. And more importantly, United States was lucky, went through 2 world wars in which United States was opportunistic, choosing the right side. So therefore, that challenge is not as violent as the previous one. But China has not yet, at least, and did not challenge the international order established by United States and her allies. Instead, China tried to join into it. They're called integration. China joined us. In other words, China's rise was achieved by integrating itself into our system, adapting our ways of doing business, called market economy or capitalism, and get into us. And now China's here. That's why it makes it so difficult for us to manage China's rise, because there's not much options, policy options, to deal with China, to manage China, because China is among ourselves already. So China's rise is achieved, again, through integration, not through expanding or challenging the international system. But here the problem becomes more serious, bigger, because now China is among us. All of a sudden we found out the number one problem of so-called China problem is that Chinese political system is not compatible with political mainstream of an international community. Because China is still a country under the system called socialism with Chinese characters. You look at Xi Jinping's speech just a few days ago at 19th Party Congress. He said it clearly, our country is a country of socialism with Chinese characters. What is socialism with Chinese characters? Very simple. A single party rule of Chinese Communist Party with a kind of distorted market economy. In other words, they do business with us in our way, but they keep all the advantages of single party rule. This is very dangerous. Why? Again, let's talk about security. Going to my first point, why we need a contract. Let's assume that we're in a kind of struggle, conflict, because we always compete for limited resources. A solution only have 2. Number one is that fight. Whoever is stronger, got it, the jungle's rule, right? But we know from watching our history and watching things around us, we know that we have an equal chance to be a miserable loser if we do it that way, because I'm strong today, tomorrow I'm getting old. I made the right decision today, tomorrow I could make a wrong decision. I'm popular today, tomorrow I can be very, very unpopular. So equally, just look at lion's life. No matter how strong you are, you can only enjoy 3 years. After that, your life will be more than miserable as you want. So therefore, we human beings figure out another way to solve a conflict caused by the competition for the limited resources. That is sign a social contract for what? A very important purpose for contract. Not just to have a fair competition, but how to share, how to make a compromise, how to make sure everybody will not and should not be an absolute winner, and no one should become absolute loser. We share, we compromise. Here is a question that if Chinese political system is not compatible with the political mainstream of international community, what we're going to have? Let's say we have an earthquake right now. Immediately we have conflicting interests. Immediately we have a security issue because we're all going to that. Security issue is an issue, by the way, security issue is an issue you're willing to use power to solve it. That's a security issue. We all want to rush out because earthquake, we're all going to die. So we fight for that door. If we all do that, the jungle's law, collectively, our chance to die increase dramatically because we're going to stuck over there. So it's we're human beings. We're smart animals. We do a contract. Let's go out one by one. Of course, those who get out last have a bigger chance to die, but collectively, our survival, the chance of our survival is much bigger. Now here's the issue. Who should get out first? In this contract, suppose here, this part, we have Christianity. You all believe in Christianity. And this part is Confucianism. Let's say that. And this part, of course, is Muslim. We're all nice people. We'll never, ever have agreement who should get out first. Because we have a different political system. Different political system is based on different values. On this part, Christianity, we all know who should get out first. The ladies, kids. But coming to this part, Confucianism, who should get out first? Maybe me, I'm 60 years old. Or you, the older one. But this part, Muslim, the strong man. Different values determine the nature of a contract. That's what matters. So we fight each other is not because we have a conflicting interest. It's because we believe in different gods. But this God is not about religion. This is a God about value system. In the history, if we think about it, we're killing each other more often than not. It's not because we have a conflicting interest. It's because we believe in different values. We always say that human differences, human conflicts involve two categories. One category is what? What do you want? On this category, we can always cut a deal, make a compromise. I want to buy a shirt. I walk in the store. The shop owner wants $5. I can only pay $2. From 2 to 5, we can always make a deal. Maybe eventually I bought it with $3.80. But another contract, another category of conflict is about what? It's about who we are or who we want to be. If we get involved into this kind of conflict, compromise is very difficult, if not entirely impossible. That's why we need communication. That's why we need to understand each other. That's why we need to understand the importance of the respect to the diversity, to live and let live. Going back to China. China could be a threat to all of us. A strong China, a powerful China, is because, again, China's political system is not compatible to the rest of us. So the stronger China is within our system, the more dangerous China could be. But what are we going to do with it? Can we change China from outside? Don't dream about it. China's 1.3 billion people. With all the mighty Americans' investment, we cannot even change Iraq. So to think that we can change China from outside, to put pressure on China and China will change, that's a wishful thinking. And let me tell you, it will be counterproductive because it only provoke a nationalistic resentment. Keep in mind, China has been victim for over 100 years, ever since Opium War in 1840. What we can hope is China will change from inside. This calls into question how strong our belief really is, how confident we are about we as a human being. I'm always positive about China's future because I believe Chinese is like everybody else. I'm a Chinese myself. Let me end up with this. In Xi Jinping's speech at 19th Party Congress, the most important line to me is this one. He said, nowadays, the major contradiction for China's development, for China to become a strong and prosperous nation on earth, is the people's increasing demand for a better life versus uneven development of our society. For a leader to realize that, I applaud it, my hat's off. Uneven development, increasing demand for happy life, that's very easy to understand. We all want that. But what is the uneven development of China? The first uneven development, of course, is the economy. China is so large. If you go to Shanghai, those who visit Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen or Guangzhou, it's almost like here. It's a developed country. The per capita is over $20,000. But if you go to hinterland, oh my God, it's very poor, very underdeveloped. This uneven development has very serious political impact, especially to the leadership. Nowadays, in terms of policy making, China's #1 problem is what we call policy distortion. What's that? It's because when Beijing made a policy, either it's a housing market policy, export policy, development policy, we always have the same result. A policy is good for Shanghai, people in Sichuan will be pissed off. Because the level of economic development is so big, you cannot imagine, you cannot expect a guy who's making $100,000 a year has the same demand interest with a guy who makes only $10,000 a year. So as a result, whatever policy Beijing adopted, the localities were all distorted for its own interests. So therefore, you can imagine how difficult for Xi Jinping to practice his leadership. I'm almost done. The policy has become a divisive tool for different provinces because they all have their local policies in China called 土政策. And uneven development is also on the social justice and rule of law. On some major cities in Shanghai, you feel your freedom is very much protected. But if you go to hinterland, it's very dark over there. The third level, of course, is distribution. The gap between rich and the poor in China is getting larger and larger. We can get into that. Because time's sake, I stop here with one final remark I really want to let you know. This also started with a very general question. The question is that we have this kind of life for only 300 years. Before 300 years, we all live miserably because industrialization. Modernization. But if I ask each of you, what is a fundamental gift, the most important gift that modernization, industrialization gave each one of us? And what's the impact of that gift? Have you thought about it? Let's say, what's the fundamental gift modernization gave each one of us? I would say the first is economic independence to each one of us. In an agricultural society, we cannot have economic independence. A wife cannot survive without a husband cannot have a warm meal without a wife, the kids cannot grow up with their parents taking care of them. When parents are getting old, we count our kids to support us. So we live in a community. The value system is community-centered. But in an industrialized society like ours, a wife can make more money than a husband. So no money, no honey, right? We all know that. Kids can be brought up by social welfare system. At my age, I'm sure I make more money than my son. My son is 32 years old. Of course, my income is more than his. I don't count him to support me. Actually, I'll support him if necessary. The second gift is more important. That is modernization. Help us to transform our most important economic resources from under our feet into our hand. In an agricultural society, you're not movable. Without piece of land, you're nobody. That's why most of people end up in America. But today, in a modernized society, your most important resources is your knowledge and your skill. I always joke, I'm a professor. As long as I know how to talk, I can make living anywhere on this. Either Shanghai, or Singapore, or United States, or Hong Kong, so on and so forth. Because my resources is portable. It comes with me. Now, this is my catch. If you are individually economically independent and social, politically movable, you are your own master. That's why you become me-centered. Your value system is me-centered. That is why all the modern societies have the best contract, because this contract is based on individual. Each one of you, every modern society is a democracy. That is not by accident. If we believe Chinese are like us, are human beings, if we see China is making a great progress towards modernity, I would say that eventually China will become like us to sign its social contract like us. But we have to be a little bit patient because China is so big. 2 questions to end my remark. Number 1, do they see positive changes in China in the past 30 years when China began to open up? Of course, there's so many positive changes in China, either in terms of economic development, human rights, so on and so forth. Today's China is way better than China 30 years ago when I escaped China, went to the United States. And second question, I'm done. Are those changes revocable or irrevocable? The answer is those changes are irrevocable. So China is on the way. I just hope, as Chinese myself, those changes will be evolutionary, but not revolutionary. Thank you so much.